Welcome to the 2023 Fendt Momentum Crop Tour video. This year, aside from the traditional trials results, we are showcasing soil compaction demonstrations, so we can bring agronomy theories to life. Then, we'll present the results of our soybean spacing and population trials, and after that, a liquid fertilizer trial. The 2023 planting season is just around the corner, so the trials for our next video will start to be planted in less than a month. We'll talk more about that when we go over the plan for 2023. At the end, we'll wrap things up with a recap and our conclusions. Now, let's get to the field. We open our crop tour video with very interesting soil compaction demonstrations. The idea is to showcase in real-life situations how impactful soil compaction can be to your farm. And we'll start with what happens after a rain and how does water infiltrate through soil.
With that, we like to consider soil compaction as that hidden underground thief, robbing our crops of nutrients and water.
But is it really that hidden, Jason? How often do we look to our fields and see standing water, especially behind tire tracks?
So with that, we thought it would be eye-opening with a demonstration to visualize just what happens after a rainfall event and how compaction influences that water infiltration. So what we have here are two columns of soil pulled out of the same field. In this cylinder, we have a minimal amount of compaction, whereas in this cylinder, we simulated a heavy amount of compaction. Now watch what happens as I pour water into both of these cylinders, simulating a rainfall.
So the first thing you notice is how quickly the water was absorbed in the non-compacted soil, while in comparison to the compacted soil where most of the water is still standing. So what's going on here?
Yeah, so anytime we drive equipment across the field, we're applying a significant amount of pressure to that soil, squeezing those soil particles together, increasing the density of that soil, and ultimately reducing the pore space. The pore space is what's critical to allow this soil to quickly absorb the water and store it for our crops to use. Now, in a practical sense, what this means is the standing water will either quickly run off and not be available to the crop, or won't drain as quickly and not allow us to get back into the field as fast as we want to.
In the end, since we can't control the rain, we need to control what is within our reach. And that is managing the compaction that our ag equipment adds to our fields.
Most of us have taken a trip around the field in the springtime when the planters are running, and as we drive past, commonly we'll see a picture that looks like this. And we ask ourselves, what made these ruts? What are the impacts to the crop?
So here we're going to give a real-life demonstration. We've all pulled into fields before where it might be a little bit less than ideal. Might be holding a little bit more moisture than like to. So what we're going to do here is we're going to bury this sensor in the dirt, and we're going to run over it. We're going to make a few passes over it, and we're going to really highlight how our tire inflation system works. So how does that weight and that PSI in the tires, how does that interact with the soil structure?
After burying the sensor, we set up an AB line so that guidance would always take us to the same point of the sensor, and we ran all passes at the same speed between 1 and 2 miles per hour. To reproduce the planter weight, we filled the liquid fertilizer tank with 1,000 gallons of water. In these first two passes, you see, we have the planter tires in road mode at 40 psi, which is what most farmers would be running. As a result, the compaction pressure created by the planter tires spiked at 25 and 31.7 psi. Next, we deflated all the planter tires to field mode all the way down to 15 psi. And as you see, a noticeable reduction in compaction pressure in the next two passes. This time, our reading spiked at 16 and 16.9 psi. We'll talk more about the results in a few minutes. In this demonstration, what we're going to do is we're going to run a couple of passes through the field. One of those passes is going to be with our tire inflation system set to its road setting, so our higher tire pressures. The second pass we're going to make, we're going to lower our tire pressure to our field pressures, which is much lower. We'll have greater contact surface area of the tires, and then we'll take a look and see the difference of those two settings in the field. So we've made a few passes here, and we've purposefully overlapped those passes where we have our center tire tracks right close together, so we can really look at the differences in those two settings between our road mode and our field pressures. So Isaac, what did we find?
Yeah, so right here we have where we dropped our tire inflation to our field mode, and then over here we have our pass that we kept it in road mode, holding that 40 psi in our pressure. It's pretty obvious throughout the field, and this is in dry conditions too. So we're just going to throw our level across here, and as you can see, we don't have a whole lot of drop into where our soil profile is at. Really not noticeable at all. Pretty negligible. We come right over here, we can definitely see where it dropped off. And so we kept this apples to apples. These passes are basically on top of each other because we really wanted to see how the tires are going to interact with the soil.
So, what did we learn from these last two demonstrations? The deeper ruts, as much as 2 inches in this case, happen because all of the weight that the planter carries in the center and also the weight of the tractor. These were good, dry planting conditions, but if we were in wet fields, these ruts would have been much worse. On the other hand, when all of the tractor and planter tires were deflated to field pressures, very low PSI combined with VF tire technology, we barely saw the tracks that were only about 1/2 inch deep. This shows that deflating the tires not only gives you more flotation and traction, but also minimizes compaction. It was the same with the sensor pressure readings in the first demonstration. While in road mode with higher pressure in the tires, we created more compaction to the soil in that important root growth area. Just by deflating the tires to field pressure, we can reduce the compaction pressure readings by 42%, from an average of 28 to 16 psi. So how does this work? How can tire inflation influence soil compaction? It's due to the fact that we increase the footprint of our tires. It's easy to see in this photo where we spray painted the tire contact area. When we increase the tire footprint, we have the same weight of the planter and the tractor now distributed across almost twice as much area, reducing the compaction. You can do this on your own, but honestly, who wants to set 16 to 18 tires manually between the tractor and planter every time you move from one field to another? That's why farmers need an automatic tire inflation system that can, in the press of a button, capture all of the field benefits of minimized compaction, increased traction, flotation, and then when you need to go on the road, have all the benefits of transport speed, fuel savings, and improved tire life. Now back to you, Arthur and Jason.
Over the last few years, we've seen a major shift of the total number of soybean acres with drills moving to planters. We've also seen a trend of earlier planting dates. All of that, combined with the rising cost of seed, has renewed the interest in seeding rates and spacing. So that's why we did these trials.
So we have 3 trials this year, 1 in Minnesota and 2 in Ohio. And at each trial, we compared 4 different seeding rates at 2 different row spacings. After doing these trials, it reminds me of a quote a farmer once told me, that growing corn is a science, growing soybeans is an art.
So let's get artistic, Jason, and let's see what we find.
So we're seeing a lot of really interesting things out in the plot today, Arthur, and I have 2 examples with us here today. Both of these plants were pulled out of the 15-inch row spacing. This particular plant was pulled out of the lowest seeding rate, and the first thing we notice on this plant is just the significant level of lateral branching. More lateral branches, higher number of nodes, more opportunities for pods. We compare that to this plant, which was pulled out of the highest seeding rate. So we've had more crowding, we have less lateral branching, lower node number, lower opportunity for pods. However, since we have a higher seeding rate, there's more plants out there to compensate for that loss in pod number. So we'll need to see what the yield data shows. The other thing that we're seeing out there is just the significant differences in plant height. So as we decrease our population, those plants typically get shorter because of the more lateral branching, but also as we narrow up the row spacing, the plants also get shorter as well. So 15s typically shorter than 30s, 7.5s typically shorter than 15s. And so I think really overall this is just a really good example just to show how well adaptive soybeans can be to their environment.
I know that I'm really looking forward for the yield results to see which combination we will hire.
So let's answer Jason's question on how low can we go on seeding rate while still maximizing yield. The highest yield on the 15-inch spacing trial was with about 90,000 seeds per acre. The risk is if you get hit with weather challenges and bad emergence, your stand could be too low and cost you significant yield. So that's why 130,000 seeding rate is the safe bet for a lot of farmers, giving them a buffer on stand count. This is because soybean seed is relatively less expensive compared to corn. But this trial also showed us something else. Note that as we continue to increase the seeding rate up to 170,000, our emergence percentage drops and yield stays the same. So, what is your soybean seeding rate? And could you be overseeding? If you're trying to make the decision between 15-inch or 30-inch spacing, there are several aspects to consider. Equipment cost, workload management, planting and harvest efficiency, weed and disease control, and obviously yield. In general, there's an expectation for yield benefits to narrow row soybeans, but that is not a guarantee. For example, in our comparison trials, the peak yield was the same on both row spacings. So the only financial benefit on 15-inch spacing was that it required lower population, therefore saving on seed. The problem is that is a relatively small financial saving. So when compared to the investment of a split row planter, in this year's trials, the farmer would be better off planting beans with his 30-inch corn planter. However, there are more things to consider here other than yield. If you're fighting a herbicide-resistant weed, you should go for 15-inch spacing. On the other hand, if you're more concerned about diseases such as white mold, 30-inch spacing is your best option. With all there is to consider for this decision, it is no surprise on how split the country is on the percentage of soybean acres planted by row spacing. Limited availability of planters last year reduced our number of crop tour locations, and weather even took out one of our corn trials in Ohio. On the flip side, OSU shared with us a liquid fertilizer trial that really connects with our agronomy discussions. Everyone recognizes the yield benefits that one can get from applying fertilizer at planting. Still, adoption is not across the board. Whether it's logistics, too many refills affecting the runtime, or weight of the planter creating compaction and making pinch rows even worse, farmers are still holding back on applying fertilizer at planting. In this trial, we can see yield results comparison from different liquid fertilizer applications. Starting with no fertilizer at all, different ratios of split apply between applying at planting and the rest as side dress versus 100% of the nitrogen applied with the planter. And here are the results. Split apply was the winning treatment. Dividing half of the rate with the planter and half side dressing showed the highest yield. This means a nitrogen rate as high as 30 gallons per acre. And even with a high capacity planter, that will reduce your runtime. The key point here is how much nitrogen should you apply to maximize yield while still being productive. how do you find the balance? Not applying any nitrogen at planting and side dressing 100% in this trial would cost the farmer a lot. The penalty would be more than 10 bushels an acre. We'll come back to this topic at the end during our conclusions. As I've mentioned before, we are about to get very busy as planting season is upon us. We'll plant trials in the Dakotas, all the way down to Georgia and back up north in Pennsylvania, and dry fertilizer trials in Ontario, Quebec, and New York. We'll be partnering with farmers in more than 12 locations all over North America. And like we've been doing over the last 2 years, we'll partner with neutral entities as well, such as the PDI Farm, Ag PhD, and a university to take our agronomy trials to the next level. The best seeding rate for our 15-inch spacing beans was between 115 and 130,000 seeds per acre. In this year's trial, we could not find a yield benefit on narrow row beans. Both 15 and 30-inch spacing results were the same. So considering only the savings on seed due to the lower population, in this trial, the farmer would be better off planting beans with his 30-inch spacing corn planter. So to make the best decision, use all information you have on hand. And that includes planting your own plant population trial, like we explained it in our last video. And then make the best call for your operation. Knowing that no matter which spacing you choose, 15, 20, 22, or 30-inch spacing, there's a momentum model for you. This liquid fertilizer trial showed the benefits of applying fertilizer at planting. A very good thing is that the weeding treatment would recommend splitting your nitrogen rate between planting and side dress, meaning you can increase your runtime. The highest yield came with the nitrogen rate of 30 gallons per acre. This means you could plant 50 acres without a refill on a momentum planter or 20 acres with most planters out there. Our recommendation based on the trial would be to balance your fertilizer rate at planting with the runtime or the number of refills. Whether if it's 50-50 or 30-70, you know what your nitrogen rate should be so you can still be efficient in a planting window that often can be very short. And obviously, look for a high-capacity planter. It was a pleasure to present to you another Fendt Momentum Crop Tour video. And be on the watch for the Crop Tour drops. Short videos and tips we'll post in Fendt's social media channels. For more information about our trials and the Fendt Momentum Planter, visit our website at fendt.com and follow us in social media at Fendt North America. Thank you and have a good planting season.